Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome in to today's session, Immigration 101, for you amazing founders. Great to see you here today. There was a slight mishap with the emails that came out from the platform. So if you are watching this at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, apologies, you've missed it. It was a couple of hours ago, but you've got the replay right here now for you to watch. And I promise we will do this session again as well, so that you can get your questions answered by our amazing guest speaker today. This subject is near and dear to my heart as an immigrant to the US. A couple of years ago, I made that switch and got my citizenship. So I went the full hog. But I know how tough it can be, and I have had it much, much easier than a lot of people for sure. So today, we're going to be hearing from the amazing Ramiro Abbas about Tuki and answering your questions about immigration. So if you do have any questions, let us know in the chat as soon as you've got them. And if you are willing to join us on stage as well, that opportunity is open to you. I will send you an invite to join us on stage and ask your question in person, just so you can have a bit of back and forth with Ramiro. If you don't want to join us on stage, if you're feeling a bit shy, or if you're sitting there in your pajamas, that's absolutely fine. Just decline the invite and I'll ask your question on your behalf. Okay. I am putting a few polls into the chat as well, so you will see those appearing. So do jump in and answer those as and when you see them. But with that, let me bring on our special guest today, Ramiro. Ramiro, welcome in. How are you doing?
Thanks, Steve. Doing great. Thanks for having us. Great intro with the US flag and everything.
Oh, of course. This is the actual one that I got during the ceremony. I keep saying swearing in ceremony, but that's totally the wrong thing to be saying. But no, thank you for being here. And it's I always love having GVN founders in who have been through our programming, right? You guys went through the Tampa Bay Wave, right? That's so amazing to like have you guys here and to hear about what you're doing and support you as founders. As you come in and support other founders, which is fantastic. So, Ramiro, I know that you've got like a bit of stuff that you want to go into, but tell us a little bit about you first. Who are you? And then take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. Ramiro originally from Argentina, so also an immigrant. That's the whole reason we started Tuki after going through the frustrating process of getting first my visa and then my green card and going through all the stress and delays and mistakes that you see out there. So we decided to build Tuki 2 years ago, give or take. Since then, we have helped more than, I think, 120, 130 immigrants today, a lot of them founders. And just great to be part of that journey of helping others kind of fulfill their version of the American dream, coming to the US, expanding their business and growing here, right? And I came originally when I was working for McKinsey. So I was a consultant for some time. I eventually got my green card. And then, we decided to go into this journey, this adventure. And then, we got into GVN through, as you said, Tampa Bay Wave, right? Earlier this year. We went through that program, which also led us to 43 North, that, it's an award we just won, and a program we're going to go through next year that I know you wanted to talk about a bit later on. So we can also touch base on that.
Well, 43 North are members of Venture Next, which is the VC firm within the community. So you've gone from one member to another one, which is fantastic. And I love that. But yes, we definitely want to hear more about that later on.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the idea today, Steve, is a bit to cover. I mean, immigration is confusing. There's many letters out there, many visas, many processes, a lot of things that are thrown out there in social media. So the idea of this session is to spend maybe, 20, 25 minutes going through the typical paths for founders, both at the kind of non-immigrant version, like the initial work visa, but also the green card options for them. What are the good things? What are the bad things? The nuances about each one that you need to understand. And of course, more than happy to answer any questions along the way and have an interesting discussion to discuss any specifics.
Amazing. I love that. I'm putting my little ticker on the bottom of the screen for our latecomers. But yeah, like Ramiro said, do put your questions in the chat and I'll send you an invite to join us on stage or I'll ask your question on your behalf if you decline the invite. But welcome in, everyone. Great to see you. Ramiro, I'm going to hand it to you then to take it away with your screen share and presentation.
Of course. Yeah, of course. And do let me know if there's questions that I won't be able to see because of the presentation.
Don't worry, I'm great at interrupting.
Okay, excellent. So, again, after getting the initial, connection with the US, getting your tourist visa, your ESTA for our European members, that allows you just to visit, just to be very temporarily in the US to do some business or to come for tourism. Then there's a few alternatives to come establish yourself in the US, to work in the US, to stay in the US, right? Kind of the first step to that, the typical first step, is what we call non-immigrant visas. Actually, the USCIS calls non-immigrant visas what's most commonly known as work visas, right? These are your H-1Bs, your O-1s, your L-1s, E2 other letters. Basically, what all these share in common is that they grant you temporary status, typically 3 years. Some are going up to 5, some are going down to 1. They are typically fairly fast to obtain, so 2, 3, 4 months you can get your visa, and there's always kind of a job or a company tied to these visas, right? So what that means is if your company disappears, if you quit your job, then that visa goes away with that action, right? So you have certain restrictions, and you typically cannot do anything outside of that visa, right? So if you are working for a company and you want to do some consulting on the side, or if you want to start a new company at the same time, you're typically not allowed to, except you actually create another visa for that other situation, right? So that's the non-immigrant visa. This is the most common visa, the most common path to start, right? Typically, most people start with this first. Now, whenever you want to become a permanent resident, you will need to get an immigrant visa, what's also known as green cards. And in this case, they are a bit harder to obtain, so the bar is higher than the non-immigrant visas, but and longer to obtain, right? It's typically going to take 18 months. In other cases, can be up to 3-4 years. But whenever you get that, then you are completely free, right? Like you are not tied to any job, you are not tied to any company. Both you, your spouse, and any kids under 21, they all get their green card. And the green card is basically a permanent residency. So you can renew it every 10 years. And definitely you can do whatever you want. You can work, you cannot work, etc. You just need to live in the US, but it's a great thing to get. So let's start a bit with popular non-immigrant visas, especially for founders. By far, the most popular visa is the O1, by far. I would say like every 100 founders I know, maybe 98 are on O1. So I just want to make that clear, like especially for early stage startups, the O1 is by far the most popular visa. Why is that? Because one, it's typically a good fit with founders, and in the next slide we're going to analyze a bit what it entails to get the O1. But also the other thing on the O1 is that it doesn't really rely much on your company and the maturity of your company. So if your company is very early, you're just starting out, you really don't have revenue or anything like that, it doesn't matter, because the O1 is focused on you as a person, as an individual, and it focuses on your achievements, not only in this current startup, but everything you did before is fair game. So if you have 3 jobs, if you won a competition, if you wrote a paper, if you were featured in press, it doesn't matter if when it was or how. You can use all of that to get the O1. You get it for 3 years. You can also renew it indefinitely. So it's typically the most common you see. The L1 is the other one that I typically see, especially for founders that own like larger companies. So the L1 needs for the L1 you need to have 2 companies. Actually, you need to have the foreign company and the US company. So let's say in my case, I'm from Argentina. So let's say I had a company in Argentina, it was incorporated in Argentina. You need to work for that company for 1 year or more. So let's say I have been working for that company for 18 months. And my role was a manager. So that's another very important thing. So I was a manager, and I had 5-6 people reporting to me. And then I also have a company in the US, or I'm just opening a company in the US, which my main role is also going to become a manager. So in that situation, you can transfer. So the company can transfer yourself from Argentina to the US. And that's another great option, right? So you are here in the US. The great thing about the L1 is that your spouse can work. So that's one thing about the O1 to consider. The spouses cannot work, right? So it's great for you, but if it's important for you that your spouse can work, the O1 might be challenging. Um, so the L1, again, you can do that. Even if you don't have a presence in the US, there is a version of the L1 that's called New Office. So what that means is that you come to the US to open your company here. There's a few more requirements there. And then a year after incorporating and starting operations, you need to file another L1 visa to show that you have hired people, expanded, and all that. That's why sometimes the L1 is a bit challenging for startups because it puts a lot of pressure on your startup. You need to hire certain people, grow revenue, grow operations, and if you don't, then it might be challenging to get that extension. So that's why it's not that recommended for early stages. But maybe you already have a larger company, and you can bring. Why would you go for the L1? The L1, very different from the O1, is mostly focused on the company and its operations and your role. So while the O1 is a great option for founders, maybe you want to then start bringing other key people from the company, and they are going to have a much harder time getting the O1 because, again, it's not the most typical one. And then we'll see why. So once you have one L1, then you did most of the work. And then if you want to keep bringing executives, then it's a kind of a easier push, right? It's a lighter push to bring some executives over here. So that's why typically L1 is a good option for larger companies. Moving to the E2. So the E2 is mostly about the investment. So if the O1 was about you as an individual and the L1 was about the companies and your role in those companies, the E2 is about the investment. It's about making an investment in the US. A very important thing to understand with the E2 is that it's not allowed, it's not available for every single country in the world. The E2 is just for certain treaty countries. You can find the list internet. You put E2 treaty list, treaty countries list, and you'll find it, and you can see whether your country is there or not. There are like 80 countries roughly, so you need to be in that country first. For example, UK is one of those. So if you are a UK founder, you can use the E2. The E2 is about making an investment in the US, about having the potential to create jobs in the US. There's no minimum requirement of money, but typically 100K is something to, roughly, it's always a good benchmark to have in mind. And this is not money in the bank, but money spent, right? So you need to have spend that in offices, hardware, inventory, marketing, whatever it is. But when you go for the E2, you need to show the US that you have already spent all this money and this is a real business. You can go down. We've seen E2s approved with like 50K, 60K investment, but again, it's a bit riskier. And it needs to make sense, right? So the thing with the E2 is the investment needs to make sure the business can thrive. So if you're putting together a rocket factory and you say 100K, then that's not going to work, right? Because 100K is not enough. So it also needs to make sense. It's not just about the number. And the other great thing about the E2, similarly to the L1, but even better, once you get the E2 investor, you can use it to bring E2 essential employees. So once you get the E2, maybe you have like 6 people from UK in that case, and you can bring them over very easily, or much easier than other alternatives. The one thing to consider, though, is that in order for the E2 to keep going, more than 50% of the ownership needs to be in hands of that nationality, right? So in UK. So let's say you start raising funds, and all of a sudden 51% of the ownership of the company is in hands of, like, let's say, US investors. Then all the E2s disappear. That's why you don't see the E2 that often for startup founders, because you're raising capital, you don't know what's going to happen. Also, if one of the founders, let's say, gets a green card, then you stop counting as a UK national, and now you're a US national for these purposes. So also that's another reason then the E2 would disappear. So E2s are a bit more common with traditional businesses, like let's say you buy a restaurant or you put yourself a franchise or something like that. That's the typical use of an E2, but sometimes for some reasons you end up choosing E2. Again, the E2, the other big advantage is that the other visa where your spouse can also work, right? That's another great reason to get the E2. And then finally, the H1B. I mean, H1B is a hot topic now with the 100K fee and all that. That is a bit more complicated now. Let's see what happens. My point of view, very subjective and not based on data, is that this is going to get knocked down in court. There were certain similar initiatives back then in 2020 of raising fees. They were knocked down in court because there's a provision in the Nationality Act, Immigration Nationality Act, that says that USCIS can only ask fees to reasonably cover the cost of processing these visas, which of course 100K is not that. So every good attorney I know also thinks that this is going to get knocked down. But for now, today, if you wanted to do a H1B consular processing in your home country, you would need to pay 100K. So H1B is typically a better fit for employees, not so much founders, because one of the main things of the H1B is that you need to do a job that is related to your field of study, and that field of study needs to be specialized, right? So sometimes when you study business, sometimes you get a hard time with this because it's not specialized enough, and you don't really need that bachelor's to do your job. So even if you studied business, when you're going for an H1B, typically you want to position yourself in a niche, right? Okay, financial, you show the finance subjects you had on your bachelor, and you go for, I'm going to do a finance job, so that's why I'm qualified. So basically the H1B, you need to have a bachelor's or an equivalent. You need to have a job offer that is related to that bachelor, and you need to pay yourself a prevailing wage. So the prevailing wage is another problem. Let's say you live in New York and you studied computer science, and you say, okay, I'm the CTO, so I'm going to be coding. Okay, so the prevailing wage for New York for computer science grads is probably in the mid hundreds, right? So you are forced to pay yourself like 150K, let's say 180K. Sometimes that's not the best for a startup where you don't want to burn that much cash, right? So that's another problem. But there's also the employer-employee relationship that can sometimes be troublesome when you're a founder. Earlier this year, they changed the H1B regulations, and they acknowledged some option of the H1B called beneficiary owner. So they acknowledge that you can have equity and ownership in your company, and you can still get an H1B. That doesn't exempt you from this employer-employee relationship. So ideally, either you have a co-founder or you have a board of directors or someone that has some authority over you. But still, you still need to pay yourself the prevailing wage. You still need to have, be related to your field of study. So sometimes I've seen founders that they were actually the CEO, but they said they were the VP of engineering to be able to match the H1B. And that's okay, you can get away with that. But in the future, maybe you want to go for a green card showing extraordinary ability, and you want to be able to say you were the CEO, but then you just said you were the VP of engineering, and then things start to get messy, right? So I think a tip of advice here, always think of immigration as a marathon, not just getting the visa right now, and understand what are the consequences 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now to make sure there's no problems down the road. Because again, it can be a problem. It can be a problem if you're not consistent. Again, maybe the officer in 3 years is not going to look at it, but maybe they will. And if they do, and if they don't like what they see, you might be in big trouble. So that's why it's really important just to do that. And also the other tip of advice here is, the more the visa is similar to your reality, the better, right? The more creative you are getting, like that's kind of okay. But if you are too creative, then all these problems start to appear, and you're going to regret it later. So I think it's better to put a bit more effort or delay your plans 3 months, but get the right visa. And once you do, you are completely, you're golden, you're completely okay with everything, and you can progress. I see a few questions here, so
yes.
them.
Well, Ramiro, I love the advice. It's absolute gold dust, and I couldn't agree more. When I went for my interview, my wife sent me with a presentation deck of our social media posts showing us being together and having fun. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to need this. And I did. They got to like the end of the interview and said, I need more evidence. And I said, oh, flip to the back. There's a deck there from my wife for our social media posts. And they skimmed through it and went, okay, stamp. And it was like that. So yeah, I totally get it. I love it. And I'm glad that you mentioned about the H-1B. I was going to ask you, and I love what you're saying here in terms of like, talking to legal friends, and they're saying, don't get sucked in to the story. There's a chance that this probably isn't going to go absolutely anywhere. Very, very, very interesting. But yes, we do have some questions. And to those of you just joining, do let us know your questions in the chat as soon as you've got them. When you ask a question, I will send you an invite to join us on stage so you can interact with Ramiro. If you don't want to do that, if you can't, if you're busy doing something else and just listening in, then just reject the invite and I'll ask the question on your behalf. Ramiro, I'm going to start with Molly Dill's question. Molly, hello. How are you doing? Good to see you. She says, can you please give some examples of extraordinary achievement that have been acceptable in your experience?
Yes, and that's I didn't prepare this with Molly, but that's a great question to go to the next slide, actually.
Oh, amazing. Okay, well then let's go back to another question, and then we'll come back to this one as we carry on.
Okay.
But Molly, I love it. You're preempting where we're going. Okay, so another question from Amjad. And Amjad, if you do want to come on stage, do let us know. We'd love to have you in to have this conversation. If I'm a non-US founder of a company incorporated in the US, which type of visa do I need to apply to if planning to visit the US and attend or exhibit conferences and exhibitions, or even explore market and meet potential customers, partners? Amjad, this is a great question. Over to you, Ramiro.
No, it is. It is a great question. So I'm going to give you the answer, and I'm going to give all the caveats. So for what you just described, if you are from a country that has the ESTA, like this waiver program, like Europe or Chile or other countries, you can just use the ESTA and come visit. That gives you up to 90 days to come conduct business activities. If you don't, the typical visa is the B1, B2, so the business and tourism visa. It's a bit blurry sometimes. What you can or cannot do is not completely obvious. I mean, some of them are clear, like, hey, coming and working remote for your company is absolutely not allowed. Okay, I want to go to the US for 3 months and work from there. Like, no, you cannot do that. Hey, I want to go 1 week to a conference. You can clearly do that. But there are some things that, start to get into the lines and are not absolutely clear. I would say that if it's shorter stays, let's say 2-3 weeks, maybe 1 month, and you're coming to visit and getting to know people, conduct business meetings, or even signing contracts or meeting investors or going to conferences or participating of an accelerator program, all that is allowed under B1, B2, because they really differentiate between work and business, right? Business, you can do. And all of these things, the more you are into the conference world, the meeting world, the exploring world, like all that is completely fine. By the way, never say work when you're in the airport, when you're coming here. I'm as a non-native English speaker, in my mind, work and business are kind of the same in Spanish, right? I use the same word. But here it's very, very different. And you want to make sure that you're saying, I'm coming for business and not for work. And the other thing there, that's what we're talking about airports, I would always recommend printing all the invites to the conferences or invite letters from people and print them. Because if you print them, you can hand them over to the officer without handing over your cell phone. Which, if you're handing over your cell phone, you're kind of inviting them to review your entire cell phone, and maybe you don't want them to do that, right? At least practically. So it's a really good idea always to print like your hotel schedule or flights, and again, invites to the conference or letters of acceptance to accelerator or everything like that. So the other thing I would advise against is to come here and spend 4 months. I see a lot of founders doing that. A lot of them get away with that. Some of them don't. And then that's a big problem because this is discretionary. And if either the officer at the airport or when you get, let's say, your O1 visa and go back to the consulate, they don't agree that it's reasonable that you spend 4 months here doing businesses and not working, then they can deny your visa and you can get into trouble, right? So I always advise my clients, like, look, if you have a conference now, and you have another conference in 1 month, like just come for the conference, go back, and then come back for the conference again, right? Avoid like staying 3, 4, 5 months. It's increasing the risk. It used to work very well. With this administration, I've seen more and more and more travels with that. So I would be careful about that. So it's fine to come and do all these things, but ideally don't do it for like 3, 4 months.
Such great advice. Like me myself, like before I got my visa process, I'm coming to the US for business, and that differentiation between the words work and business, I hadn't even considered. And I get it. I totally get it. That's so smart. So, something that I always was kind of told going through this process was when you get to the airport, don't be chatty. Just answer the questions that need to be answered. Don't feel like you need to go into a conversation. Like, is that good advice?
Absolutely. That's great advice. Like respond clearly. Don't be obscure or shady or what, like answer directly what they ask for, but not more than that. And that's good advice both for the airport and for the consular office, right? For consular interviews, like be straightforward. If they ask you something, respond exactly what they're asking for. Short sentences, don't go over. This is great advice I've heard from, like, we have partners that are former consular officers. So sometimes when you have clients that, maybe we see some risk on the interview, we typically send them over to them. And these are people that have worked as consular officers for, like, say, 10 years before on the other side of the window. And they can give you great advice, right? And every time I've heard these people say the same thing, like what you just said. Hey, short answers, to the point, don't go over, don't start talking about other things, just respond when they ask, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We've got a question from Raj, and Raj is coming onto the stage. So I'll let him ask the question directly. But I do have one more question for you, which is, you mentioned how on the ESTA, you can't come here and work remotely. And without getting you in trouble, I just got to ask, maybe just for your opinion here, how are they going to know? Like, how are they going to know that you've come here and that you're working?
Yeah. I mean, look,
is there a question that they could ask that would make you crumble and admit that you were going to work remotely?
No. I mean, look, the regulations were made, of course, way before remote work was a thing, internet and all these things, right? So they are not, some of these things are pretty ridiculous. And also, if you're doing certain things, back here and there, responding to a few emails that are, back at home, I don't think they're going to enforce that, because we all know, like, it's impossible to be here without working. I think because there's discretion, again, the more factors that are going to tend to show that you are clearly working, the worse it becomes. And that's why I think the main factor is how frequently you come to the US and how much you stay, right? So if you come for 3 months, you leave 2 weeks, and then you come again for 2 months, then it's a bit of a hard sell to say that in those 5 months you weren't really working. So again, but if you came for like 2 weeks, you left 2 months, and then you come 1 month, and then you leave a few months, like, it's a much better sell. So I think it's overall, what I always say is, like, if you look it from outside and you look at your own situation, would you believe what you're saying, or are you having questions? And the more questions you might have, the more risky it becomes, and the more you depend on the discretion of the officer, basically.
Love that. Okay, so I feel like I would be getting prepared for the tourist activities that I'm going to be doing as I'm working, right? Like, I'm going to go see Niagara Falls, I'm going to go do this and that, and this is my plan, and who I'm staying with, and all of that stuff. Okay, I love it. So I'm going to bring Raj on. Before I do, I did want to quickly mention that if you like what you're hearing and you're thinking, I would like to learn more about Ramiro and potentially work with him, when we do have a $500 discount if you're interested. I'm putting a button on the screen in the bottom right. Fill in that form if you do want to apply for that. But with that, Raj, let me bring you on. Welcome in, Raj. You've got a great question, so I'll let you ask it directly to Ramiro.
Right. First of all, good morning. Thank you for inviting me onto stage. And so I'm just curious, a little background. I work for a company called the Winnow Fund, and we are a small VC firm based in Madison, Wisconsin. And one of our main funds that we're currently working on right now is specifically for student entrepreneurs. And a lot of that comes down to international students as well from that aspect. And while they have a visa for that, what we're curious about is really, is there a way that we could potentially provide a visa or sponsor these investors in such a way that it would relate to an E2 potentially, or another sort of visa that would allow them to stay in the United States for work?
Yeah. So there is a hack with the E2 that again, it's a bit getting a bit creative, but I've seen some people do it. So technically, again, as I said before, there's the E2 investor and the E2 essential employee. The idea for the E2 investor is for that person putting the money, right? And then the essential employee, not necessarily. So what some founders have done is you say that the investor is not a person, but it's the company. So let's say, again, you have 100% Argentinian founders. And we raise a seed round of, I don't know, $3 million, $15 million post-money valuation. And now the investors own 20%. So and a thing you can do is you say, okay, now the investor is the company. We are not going to get an investor visa. We're just saying the investor is the company. And the investor is 80% owned by Argentinians and then 20% owned by these US investors. And once you get the investor qualification for the E2, then you sponsor all the founders as essential employees of the E2. Again, I've seen it done. It can be successful. I don't think it's the spirit of the visa. So depending on the consulate, they might not agree with that interpretation and they might reject it, right? But that's one way of kind of circumventing. I saw a lawyer that said that it was like money laundering because you're laundering like US money and you're putting it as a Argentinian investor. But it's legal, but it's kind of what you're doing, right? You're taking US capital, you're putting it to a foreign company, and you're saying now the investor is the company. Again, you can do it. It's completely legal. You can absolutely do it. But again, in my opinion, it's a bit getting creative, and you might not get away with that. Again, for founders, and we're going to, in the next slide, we're going to look a bit on the O1. And there are some things that you can do to help the founders improve quickly their profiles for O1. And they can just go for the O1, right? That's the other alternative as well. The L1 implies them living abroad and working for 1 year outside, so I don't think that's typically a good option. So I'd say that, yeah, the E2 is a possibility, or just helping the founders improve their O1 profile and going for the O1 is typically what I see the most. I would say that's the typical things. I'm seeing another, yeah.
Thank you.
Other, was that good, clear, Raj?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Amazing. Quick follow-up from Matilda. In such cases, the employees/founders need to be of the same nationality as the investor.
Yes, absolutely. So in that case, I mean, in the case I just said, kind of that hack that some people do. So let's say the founders are Argentinians. And the company, again, the 20% investor is irrelevant because what we are focusing on is the 80% that is owned by Argentinians. So that company is in control of Argentinians. In that case, all the founders should be Argentinians. And if you have, like, let's say, one essential employee that is from Brazil, then you couldn't bring that Brazilian person because this only works for Argentinians in that particular case.
Great question. Great questions, everyone. So keep those coming. I guess let's go back to Molly's question then with your next slide, and let's keep going with the presentation, Ramiro.
Yeah, and happy to do. So again, as we keep saying that the O1 is kind of the most typical ones, or the most typical visa for founders. And Molly was asking about some examples. So we can do both. We can talk about the requirements and we can give some examples. So the O1 is based on your extraordinary ability. There are 8 criteria to demonstrate that you're extraordinary per the US regulations. And you need to get at least 3. If you get at least 3 of these, and we can argue that you're at the top of your field, then you basically get the O1. So the first one we're going to go for is awards. So if you have received nationally or internationally recognized awards in your field. Here it depends how competitive the award is, how many people applied for. Student award are not an option, unfortunately. They need to be professional awards. And the great thing for founders is that venture capital is more often than not recognized as an award. So every founder that has raised institutional capital, that's a great example that you can always use to claim awards. Second one is critical employment. So this is that you had a critical role at a distinguished organizations. Of course, as founder, it's very obvious that your role is critical. Although one time USCIS challenged that, which was kind of ridiculous, but things that happen. But if you're of course critical, the detail with this is the second part of that sentence, which says for organizations that have a distinguished reputation. So sometimes this might be challenging for very, very early startups. Like why do they have distinguished reputation? So of course, if it's like a 1-year startup, you don't have like much revenue or much operations. But we can use things such as press, such as VC funding, such as accelerators or other things to show that this is a distinguished organization. And then you can claim that criteria. And of course, if you had previous jobs at other companies or startups, you can always claim those critical roles as well. And critical role can be anything. You don't need to be C-level, right? If you were lead engineering or the whatever role, we can claim that it was important for the company. You can always use it. And basically, one of the main pieces of evidence here is going to be a letter from someone at that organization, ideally your manager, your boss, just talking about why you were critical, what were the things you did for that company. Third one is published materials. This is pretty straightforward. If you have been featured in major media or trade publications, if they have talked about you, about your work, things to consider here is it's important the relevance of the publication. So the larger, the more relevant, the better. And also that they have actually talked about you and your work. So just a brief mention or a quote that something you said is typically not good enough for this category. And one question we get very often is, does this need to be just in the US? No, it can be in every country in the world. So press from your home country is perfectly allowed as a good evidence here. Fourth, judging. This is my favorite category. It's extremely flexible. So any situation where you were invited to judge the work of other professionals is fair game. So if you were invited to be a judge in a hackathon, in a pitch competition, if some accelerator asked your help to select the next cohort, if a VC wants to seek your advice as subject matter expert for a startup, if you did peer reviews for an article, if you were a code reviewer in an open source community, like there's many ways that you can fulfill this. The important things is that you're not judging students, and that it was kind of an external thing. It's not just as part of your job duties, right? Some people are like, yeah, I'm a manager, I evaluate, my direct reports every year. Like, yeah, that doesn't count. Like, it needs to be external to your company. It needs to be for invitation. Memberships are a member of a distinguished organization. That's hard to get into. That it's by invitation. There are not that many, to be honest, in the entrepreneurship world. So that's why we always use accelerators. So YC, Techstars, every accelerator that's really hard to get into and really requires some, it has a low acceptance rate is good for this. Sometimes if you get, a hostile officer, they will push back with those. And technically they can, because this is, in theory, an association that was based on your achievements in the field. And when YC accepts dropouts of like 18-year-olds that have a great idea, that's not really based on their achievements. It's based on their potential, right? So if you want someone that really wants to go by the book and they want to really be hostile to you, they can actually push back and there's not much to do. But having said that, a lot of times, especially in O1, this works. Showing accelerators works. Just that small caveat. High remuneration is about getting paid more than your peers. Ideally, being in the top 90th percentile. Peers are considered people in your same geography doing something similar to what you do. So let's say you are in Argentina. It doesn't matter how many dollars I earn versus the US, which that would be very low. But if compared to Argentinians, let's say I was a marketing manager, okay, compared to Argentinian marketing managers, I can say that I was on the top 90th percentile, so then that works. especially for founders. And in the O1 context, equity is generally accepted as a piece of evidence. So if you have a safe that says that your company is worth $10 million and you own 30% of that company, then you can say your compensation is $3 million on top of whatever cash you get. And that's typically a good piece of evidence for O1. When you go to the green card version of O1, the EB-1A, that typically doesn't work there, but with O1, they are much more flexible. And going to the last two, original contributions, this is if you have done something original that has impacted your field. This is extremely subjective. The best pieces of evidence here is that if you did a method that people are using, if you wrote a book that people are using, let's say in university curricula, if you have a patent that is being commercialized, if you wrote a paper that is being highly cited, or if you build a startup that is really changing the way the industry works and other people are implementing it. But again, it's very subjective to be able to say that if you did something truly original and that is truly having an impact in the industry. So this is one of my least favorite criteria because of the highly subjective nature of it. And finally, scholarly articles. So the best example of scholarly article is if you wrote like a paper, a peer-reviewed paper in academia. But for founders, that's not typically the case. But if you, for example, wrote some technical articles in, I don't know, Forbes councils or other trade publications about business, about your industry, that's generally accepted and is a great piece of evidence. Just to finalize this, I think it's important to understand that some of these things, some of these activities we mentioned affect many layers. So if you raise your seed round, but then you are covered in press about that seed round, so that helps us with awards, that helps us with published materials, and that's also helps us with critical employment. Because that helps with the distinguished nature of your organization. And we can also now claim high remuneration because you have that price point. So there are some of these things that are good that the same activity you can use for multiple categories. But generally speaking, if you want to improve your profile, the three usual suspects for that are press. So maybe working with some PR people to help you get some exposure, some organic exposure. Judging, just getting invited to a hackathon, a pitch competition, helping an accelerator choose their next members, and scholarly articles. So just writing some technical articles of your industry in some trade publication, maybe in the US or outside. So those three are typically the ones that have better ROI when you want to improve your profile and improve your chances of getting the O1. Okay, and then my last slide, and then we'll go everything into questions. So once let's say you got your visa and you now want to go for the green card, there are two green cards that you can go for that you can actually self-petition. So remember, we said like every single non-immigrant visa, there needs to be a job attached to it, there needs to be a company attached to it. In the green card, that's not necessarily true. These two green cards on screen, you can actually self-petition. So it can be, in my case, like Ramiro signing my paperwork and talking to the US saying like, I want to get this green card because I'm extraordinary or I'm doing something important for the country. So the first one, the EB-1A, is basically kind of the big brother of the O1. So everything we said for O1 is still valid for the EB-1. It's just like a higher bar. That's the only difference. So typically you get your O1, you keep improving your profile, you get some more things, you expand your company, and then at some point you reuse all your O1 materials, you put something on top of that, and then you go for the EB-1. So not much to say there. As it's the EB-1, so the numbers there, so EB is for employment based, then the number is for the priorities, and then the letters are for subtypes. So the fact that it's one, that means that it's the fastest green card you can get. So for most countries, that means that if you file, you get approved, and you file for the green card, maybe in less than a year, you can get a green card. EB2 is the second preference. So that means that for most countries, this is probably a wait time of like 2-3 years. Again, if you're from India or China, those numbers kind of explode. So for EB-1, it's probably for India 2-3 years, and EB-2 is like 12 years these days. So it's a bit different, but just something to consider. And then the NIW, the EB-2 NIW, is called the National Interest Waiver. You need an advanced degree. So an advanced degree is either a master's or a bachelor's and 5 years of experience, or a PhD, or something comparable to that. And then you need to show a plan in the US. So what are you going to do? What's your endeavor? What is it that you're going to be working on? You need to show that that endeavor has national importance and is important to the US as a whole, and that you are well positioned for that. So let's say we have a client right now. I always give the same example. So we have a client that we just filed that she has a master's in MIT in data science, and she's working on drug discovery for cancer. So even though, of course, what she's doing is great for her career, and for the lab, but it's also great for the US, right? Because if she's successful, then that's a cure for cancer, or better medicine for cancer. Or people working on some research that is going to be good for the US, microprocessor research or whatever it is. So, but let's say you have a very proficient and very profitable marketing agency, it's kind of a hard sell. Like, why is the US benefiting from you having a great marketing agency? So NIW was extremely popular between 2021 or 22 and 23, 24. There was high approval rates. A lot of people were getting this across the board. Approval rate was around 86% back then. This year is closer to kind of 43, so it kind of slammed into 2. I think they have raised the bar considerably. So this is a great option if you have a good story that makes sense, right? But it's highly discretionary, way more discretionary than most visas. So that's something you just need to know. So you can go for that, but it's extremely discretionary. When you read the language, it's not, it's a very short memo saying that, yeah, you need to do something that is important to the US and you're well positioned. But, if the officer doesn't agree with your claim, like, it's hard to push back. You cannot even sue in federal court because of how discretionary this is. So again, it might be a great option actually for people, but you just need to make sure that you have a good case for that. And that's it. That's everything I have for today in terms of presentation. But open to any questions or discussions.
Ramiro, this is awesome. This is so helpful. To the audience, let us know any final questions you've got. We've only got a few minutes left, but we can take a few more questions. So do put them into the chat now if you want a chance to ask them. And I wanted to mention as well, I feel like GVN, we actually have a place here where we can be helpful, right? We're in the business of making connections. And so if you are thinking about what Ramiro was saying in terms of, being featured in publications, the awards piece of it, let me know. Maybe we can make a connection. We've got accelerators all over the US that are specializing in very different fields that could be interested in doing something and publishing or whatever it may be to help you with that case. Super interesting. So something that was just on my mind as you were talking about the kind of extraordinary ability. I get it when you're talking about, like, if you're a marketing agency, how does that come across for, so, like, national interest? The last startup that I worked for, we did this successfully, right? We got someone into the US with extraordinary ability, and it was just because the startup was doing something that no one else was really doing, right? So there weren't many people that could specialize in this area, in this kind of like scientific field. So I don't know. A part of me is like, is this, we've lost Ramiro. Okay, well, clearly what I was saying was rubbish. No, but ladies and gentlemen, we will get Ramiro back. Do ask us your questions if you've got some. I will use this time to mention the perk that we've got with Tuki that will be coming out next week. I'm going to pin it into the chat now if you are interested. And I want to do a quick shout out to Generator as well. I know we've got Molly, Lauren, and a few others on the call. At this minute in time, in October, Generator founders have redeemed $2.25 million worth of perks already. There have been 118 redemptions. I don't know what's going on at Generator this month, but you guys are going for it in terms of making the most of the discounts and the perks that we got on the platform. So for you founders, do make sure you get on there and take full advantage of those discounts. If you're sitting there thinking, what on earth is Steve talking about? I have no idea what he means by perks, or send me a message, steve@gan.co. I will make sure that you are set up with access to these perks and discounts. I think we have Ramiro back. Let's see. There is a poll. I've been putting out a couple of polls in the chat as well. I'm going to put another one out now. Would love to get your thoughts and votes on these. Ramiro, we've got you back.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know. My internet did something funny.
That's okay. That's okay. That's the way it works. I did a bit of self-promotion for Tuki, and I would love, just with the few minutes we got left, to tell us about it. The reason why I'm excited about what you're doing is because it's graphical, and it's taking something so complicated and making it so simple. So give us the spiel about Tuki.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, Tuki was born out of my own frustration with the immigration system, feeling stressed, feeling alone, taking forever, completely outdated and manual processes. Like bear in mind, like a typical O1 maybe has like 800 pages. So it's some work to put together, right? And the industry at large, they're just doing this by putting all the documents into a Google Drive, making some letters on Word for you to redline, and then they literally are printing, 100 different files and putting them together manually. So it's extremely weird how this is continuing to work. So we decided to make this better and to combine those great attorneys that we have in our team, but with all this technology, just to make it easier and more transparent and faster, and really provide that experience immigrants are looking for and they deserve, and on something so important, right? This is not just by wearing a pair of shoes, right? That you don't find the right color and that's fine. Like, your life depends on it, your family depends on it, your business depends on this. So it's extremely important not to have the best experience and the best quality. And that's exactly what we set out to do 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, I love it. And if you do go to the Tuki website, I've just put it in the chat. I feel like if you actually look at the pricing tab, you get a kind of a feel for what this is going to be like. And again, I just love the fact that you're going systematically through the questions that are relevant, answering them, and things are changing in real time, telling you what you need to be doing. It's an incredibly stressful process, but the system just feels nice. It makes you feel smart. I think that's the thing. The reason why I like it. It makes you feel smart, that you actually understand what's going on. So I can't recommend these guys enough. Do check them out. And like I said, there is that $500 discount pinned to the top of the chat. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at time. If you do have any questions later on, let me know. Happy to connect you with Ramiro. But Ramiro, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. We will definitely do this again. I feel like this is exactly the sort of stuff that I love putting on, because I feel the pain. I absolutely feel the pain. But Ramiro, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Glad it was helpful. And of course, we're here to help with whatever you need.
Amazing. Okay, thank you all so much. See you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye, all. Thank you.